Chapter. We have with us Niloofer Narendran, the Director of Transformation at Fiserv. Niloofer, what a pleasure to have you with us. Niloofer Narendran has more than 21 years of proven expertise designing and executing on the strategic initiatives for global technology conglomerates like Fiserv and Hewlett Packard, working across Asia Pacific, Europe, and the Americas. She had led multiple business innovation and transformation initiatives around mergers and acquisitions, go-to-market strategies, customer engagement models, and cost optimization. In her spare time, she also is one of the founding members of the global G6PD COVID-19 task force. And that task force is focused on creating more awareness of an X chromosome linked genetic mutation that impacts an estimated 500 million people, and to understand the role of that chromosome during the current pandemic. Niloofer, from culture and digital transformation to global health transformations, you're doing a lot of very, very interesting work, and I'm very excited and honored to have you as a speaker for us today.
Thank you so much, Jose. Jose, did I say it right?
You got it.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm sorry.
It looks good. Go for it.
Oh, okay, great. Not sure if you heard that, but if you did you hear noise by any chance? Or did that sound chaotic?
It was very faint, Niloofer. I almost could not hear you.
Oh, you couldn't hear it? Okay, okay. So I was playing a little bit of chaotic music, just as a heads up. And, generally just imagine noise and clanging and background music from your kitchen, if you may. And now I'd like to play a little different music, and tell me if you can hear this one. Can you hear this one?
Yeah, can hear a little bit faint in the background again.
Okay. Any guesses for whose music this is? And if you guessed it as Mozart's, that's right. That was Mozart's symphony. Unfortunately, didn't play as loud and effective as I would have liked it to. But anyway, so let's compare the two music sessions. And the first one was loud, chaotic noise that I'm sure got you a little confused about what's happening. The second one, which was Mozart's symphony, is much more harmonized, synchronized, cohesive, and coordinated. And what I like is there's a saying by David Amram, and he says, in symphonic music, when you are conducting, you're actually feeling the whole orchestra, thinking ahead so you can prepare for change. So very similarly, in the session that we have today called Orchestrating Change, we will be talking about you as the principal conductor and how you can feel the whole orchestra within your organization, think ahead, and prepare for change successfully. So what's very interesting is this is a study done by the Bridges Business Consultancy Group. And in a recent study as late as 2016, they had interviewed 144 leaders across 38 different companies in 18 different countries. And what is very interesting is that they found that even if the strategies were well formulated, 67% of organizations fail in terms of strategy execution. And while there's a lot of work and thinking that goes into strategy design, unfortunately, what gets missed is when you actually start trying to make this real in the organization and manage that change. So like I said, in today's presentation, I like to think of the role that I play as a principal conductor, that's orchestrating change. What I have is, through my experiences over the last so many years, I've got a strategic vision framework that I like to use for these initiatives. I also want to talk to you about the 3 foundational pillars for successful execution based on my experiences so far, and then the big mistakes or the common mistakes that a lot of organizations do as well make while executing these initiatives. So let's start off with a little story. So let's imagine there's this little hut on the left-hand side of my presentation. It's a lodge. And so you have mom, dad, you have a beautiful teenage daughter. Let's assume we have mom and dad have a set of twins, maybe 8 years old. And then you have grandma who's living with the family. Now, mom and dad have a common shared vision. They want to move into this beautiful mansion that's on the right. And they know, while they know that it's going to be very difficult to maintain, and it's going to be much more work in the mansion, they are very excited and, they really think that they need to move to the next level. Now, let's think of the twins. So the twins, of course, they enjoy playing in the forest, but they are very excited, especially when dad talks about the pool in the mansion that they're going to own. And they're working towards it. They get very excited and they bought into the vision and they are ready to commit to whatever needs to be done. Now, of course, the teenage daughter is at an age where she is in love and she refuses to move out of the area. She wants to be where she is because her boyfriend, and let's call him Antonio, is right there, So she's made it very clear that she has not bought into this vision and she will not move. What about grandma? Now, grandma enjoys the company of her kids and she is petrified by the move because grandma's concern is that she might be delegated to the furthest room in the mansion and then she won't be able to engage with her family and her kids and grandkids the way she does today. So while you can see that this obviously by default is it's an amazing vision to have and a goal in terms of the family to achieve, you see that every stakeholder in the family is looking at this very differently. Now let's look at it from an organizational perspective. We had one of our products that we were looking at where we had a huge addressable market if we were able to take the product down market. So we worked on a lot of topics and looked at different areas to get the price right and let's get out there and get this market segment. And when we trained the workforce, the first question that came up was, am I going to lose my job? And obviously we hadn't done a very effective job of talking about that future state vision or the goal that we had in terms of what we were trying to achieve. And there was inherent fear of job loss and job security is such an important topic for the organization today. So what is very important is when you are looking at a strategic vision and a future state, and when organizations want to move to the future state, you need to take the entire organization along and you need to have people buy into that vision, however fancy you think it is or however good you think your vision is. You need organizational buy-in. And the strategic vision framework actually helps from looking at it from a strategic design perspective to actually looking at the execution of that vision. So let's talk about the strategic vision framework a little bit. And it's no rocket science. Basically, you look at the strategic driver that you're driving towards. And the first thing you should do is try and align it with the corporate vision. So what is your corporate vision and how does your strategic initiative tie, or the strategic driver that you're driving, how does that tie into that overarching organizational vision? The second thing you would do is you would look at the different, you would look at breaking down your strategic vision into different vision elements. Once you've defined the vision elements, you look at building out work streams that can support these vision elements and reaching that goal. The work streams then go ahead and create their own goals and their own high-level deliverables. And then all that is put into an integrated plan of record. So the beauty of this framework, and like I said, it's nothing new, it's just bringing it together, is to have strategy and execution in the same box and to be able to work, concurrently in terms of strategy and execution on a regular basis to make it happen. Now, let me ask you a question. How many of you right now can tell me what your organizational vision statement is? And think about it. And if you do know what your organizational vision statement is, how many of you know what your business unit's vision statement is? And then how many of you really know what you're doing and how your work, or maybe you're in the transformation office, so you probably know this a little better than the others, but think about the employees. How many of you believe that your employees on a day-to-day basis understand what that vision is and are working towards reaching that goal on a day-to-day basis? Now, I've come across a lot of senior managers throughout my career where vision statements, they're those lofty goals that you put up on the front slide of a town hall, if you do, and that's about it, right? Management doesn't have time for this. It's lofty. I have fires burning. I have things to do on a day-to-day basis. This doesn't get in as much attention as it needs to. And even if, okay, you've spent time and you've defined the vision, how are you actually executing and how are you communicating that right to the bottom of the pyramid such that everyone knows how they're contributing towards reaching that overarching goal? So that's what the strategic vision framework is helping you to do. And all this looks nice on theory and paper. So let's take an example to see how this can actually work in reality. So how do we make this real? So let's take a hypothetical example. I, of course, cannot share my internal strategy documents with you. So I will use a hypothesis or an assumption. So let's look at Fiserv's organizational vision is to move money and information in a way that moves the world. So let's assume that for the payments division, our goal or vision would be to become a fully integrated payments provider of choice globally. So that's our vision statement. Now, how do you break that vision statement down into vision elements? So I see three big pieces of work. One is we're talking about going global, right? We're talking about being a global provider of choice. So what does global mean, right? Which geographies are we planning to look at? What type of growth are we looking at? Is it inorganic? Is it organic? So those are a lot of questions that need to be answered in terms of going global. When we think of becoming a payments provider of choice, again, we've got to ask ourselves, so what are we going to provide in terms of products, right? What is that payments provider of choice and what are the different products that we need to support that vision and become the payments provider of choice? Now think about it. If you did this in isolation, you would only think of all the most, the most advanced, maybe data analytics and, let's do the latest. But the question is, for these geographies that I'm now focused on, for those geographies, what are the right products and payment products of choice that we need to think of? And then the third part is talking about this fully integrated model, right? Now, when I say fully integrated, what does that mean? Now, if this was Fiserv, I know that I have a huge product portfolio in Fiserv that we might want to integrate with. So we'll actually have to prioritize the product portfolio to look at which products for which geographies would make the most sense. Now, think of third-party integrations. Now, that's a universe, right? There's such a huge universe of third-party products. Now, which products would we want to integrate with? And that's how we build out this sort of third aspect of it. So once you've identified the vision elements and you've started designing the strategy in terms of strategy design, you are able to identify the work streams that are required to achieve this goal. Now let's come to the work streams. The work streams themselves will start defining their own goals. In terms of the geographies, you might have a work stream that's focused on a specific region that wants to go very aggressive in some countries and not as aggressive in the others. You might also have, depending on the geography, you might decide on inorganic growth or organic growth, or you might actually look at a third-party partnership in that region. So there's a lot that the work streams have to define as well and build out their plans. And then you have high-level deliverables. We're not looking at it as milestones on a project plan, more broadly in terms of what are the big ticket items that we expect to deliver in large chunks of work. And then all that is put together in terms of an integrated plan of record. And now you can see that principal conductor that's actually going to orchestrate this entire vision and make it real, working with these different work streams that are spread out across the globe. So this example that we took was about at the business unit level, but sometimes we just have to work on a specific strategic initiative. And what I really like to do is I like to look at how does that strategic vision tie into that overarching organizational vision. So how does it tie into your service line vision? How does it tie into your business unit vision? How does it tie into your organizational vision? So everyone working on that strategic initiative really understands how they are contributing towards actually moving the organization forward as well. So let's move on and talk about the 3 foundational pillars for successful execution. And over the years that I have worked on multiple strategic initiatives, I find that there are 3 key pillars for success. And one is to maintain focus and to gain buy-in, and that is critical in an organization. The second one is around the governance model. And we'll talk about this in a little more detail. You can have different governance models depending on the type of initiative that you're driving. And the third and the most important and critical piece is culture and communication. And culture, you can think of it at the individual level. You can think of it at the corporate level. You can think of it at the national or the geographic level as well. In terms of communication, I don't know if you've heard of the 3 C's of communication, and they are communicate, communicate, communicate. And I cannot tell you how important communication plays as a role, both in terms of managing upwards as well as managing downwards when you're looking at a strategic initiative. So what I would like to do is I'd like to take a few examples from my current and past experiences working with different multinationals to give you examples across these 3 pillars and how we've made it work. So the first example is talking about a product that we were looking at going down market again. And we were looking at a specific client segment where we actually had to bring down the cost of implementations by half. And one of the first things that we did is we engaged the SMEs in the different, in the different groups that were actually doing the work. And we identified the problem statements of where the biggest chunks of work would lie in terms of bringing down this cost. And we started, the best part is because the folks that were doing the work and would actually be using this model going forward were a part of the solution, we had buy-in from that team from day one. Because in fact, when I spoke to folks, some of them were like, I've been saying this for years. Like, why don't we do it this way? And that's the fact, like the folks on the ground have the best ideas because they are the ones that are working on this day in, day out. And by engaging them up front, you're able to gain much more buy-in, and they feel ownership towards executing and making this successful. We also had looked at an as-is analysis of where our costs, and we actually worked with, I'm sorry, I keep getting things. We did work with the sponsor to come up with what the target state goal was. So that's target state goal of reducing the cost by half was very, very clearly articulated from day one across the organization and across the teams that we were working with. And everyone was focused on a very specific goal. So let's talk about governance models. Now, in terms of governance models, I don't think there's a one size fits all at all. And every initiative that you drive, you'll have to look at it from the complexity, the dynamics, the situation that you're in at that point in time, to look at what is the best governance model that would work for your organization and for that strategic initiative. So I want to give you 3 different examples. The first one is where we were moving from a publicly listed company to actually delist. We were one of the first companies to delist from a local stock exchange, and we were getting merged into a global IT giant. And the global IT giant had a captive unit, so we were merging with the captive unit, and then of course aligning with the global IT giant as a subsidiary. In this model, it was a merger of equals in the sense both the captive unit and the publicly listed firm had an equal say in terms of strategy and design. And it was a 2-in-the-box model where we were trying to look at the best of both worlds and pick up what would be the most relevant to move forward with. So we had different work streams, and each of the work streams had representatives from both the organizations. Now, it was actually a 3-in-the-box model. So on top of what the two resources that we had from each organization, or the 2 teams that we had, we also had a global touch point and representation from the global corporate office that would help with corporate alignment, as well as help as an escalation point when it was required. So that's one model. The second model is this was a huge corporate initiative that was driven across multiple geographies and multiple business lines. And we were looking at moving from a more localized delivery model to a global delivery model. And in this case, given the scale of the initiative, we had a corporate team that drove the strategy at the corporate level. And then you had regional leaders in each of the regions that actually were able to, look at the corporate initiative, make it relevant for that geography, and work with the business lines in those geographies to make it happen. And in this case, the business lines own and drove the plans in terms of execution. Now, the third model is, again, a very interesting model where we were trying to drive innovation through different centers of excellence. Now, these centers of excellence were built on different technology and business process areas, and they were a virtual pool of resources across the globe that were actually trying to come together to do great things and innovate and move us from the terms of technology excellence and business process excellence. We were trying to move to the next level of maturity. So we had a common charter, and we had a common budget at the central level. And we actually worked with each of these different centers of excellence to help them with the innovation and driving their models forward. So as you can see, 3 different examples and 3 different governance models, depending on the need of the hour. And I must add here, I have had fantastic mentors throughout my career. I cannot tell you how important it is, that have helped me through and have given me visibility to these type of initiatives, which I would not have had a chance to do so otherwise. So let's talk about culture. And in terms of culture, I want to focus on organizational culture in this case. Now, when we were, I spoke to you about this publicly listed firm that was trying to delist and was now moving to become a subsidiary, a captive unit of a global IT giant. We had an excellent management of change consultant that had come in and did a workshop with us. And the workshop was basically to identify the attributes of the different teams in the different organizations that were now coming together. And what was very interesting is that you find on the left-hand side, the tough ones, I think that's rugby, or if you're in the US, you'd know it as football. So obviously you can guess the publicly listed firm, aggressive, got to get my numbers, got to, got to push, got to get my way. That was the culture, the essence of the culture in the publicly listed firm. Now, compared to that, you think of the captive unit, working for a global IT giant, looking at new products and innovation and process and building out stuff, very sophisticated. They were the polo players. And we actually attributed their, the behaviors to different sporting events, which helped the team visualize and understand where each player was coming from. And I think the most important part of culture is being aware, because once you're aware, you recognize where the person's coming from and can, work towards a better outcome. Now, in this case, the management, of course, was changing as well, right? The business model was changing. We were moving from a listed company to a delisted company. So the management team made a very concerted effort to look at changing the culture and merging these two cultures and moving to a culture that would work in the new model. So the next topic I want to talk about is communication. And you keep hearing this, so I'm not going to reiterate a lot of stuff that is common around communication, which is the right communication at the right time with the right context. But there's one aspect of communication, especially when you work with a global audience, that I feel is missed a lot of times. So I want to give you this real life example of what happened to me. So to the left, you see that pink little Fiat. That's the kind of car that I grew up in. At one point in time, that's what my family could afford as well. And I hadn't driven a lot where I came from. And then I was very, very fortunate. Like I said, I've had some excellent mentors throughout my career. Very early in my career, I got the opportunity to move to the headquarters of HP in Palo Alto and work on a very large strategic initiative at that time. And I hadn't driven much at all in India. And I realized once I came to California that I cannot survive without a car. So I decided to take a few driving lessons. And then once I finished I finished 2 classes, I decided I'm going to go and I'm going to rent a car and I'm going to drive around. So I rented the car and I started driving around the Stanford University area. And this happened. And I look into my rear view mirror and I'm like, oh, damn it, I've got to close that. And so I stop the car, I park, and I go and I try and shut it, and it's not shutting. And 2 fellow students, 2 male students in a nice sports car stop, and they're like, can we help? And I'm like, yeah, my dicky won't shut. And they looked at me and they're like, I'm sorry, can we help? I'm like, yeah, my dicky won't shut. And of course, they looked at me like I was, this crazy woman up to no good. And they decided that the best thing they could do was to drive away. And I'm not making this up. So I want to let you know that this is from the Collins English Dictionary. Where I grew up, what you call the boot or what you call the trunk is what we call the dicky. And the dicky is an enclosed compartment of a car for holding luggage. Now, as you can see, I did not do a good job of communicating my requirements to a global audience. And they obviously decided that the best thing to do was to drive away, which I would rightfully do as well. Now, let's translate this into the organizational context as well. So fast forward a few years later, we had built out a back office team in one of the lower cost geographies, and they were supporting the European team with doing a lot of reporting and back office work that the team required. And when management changed, when the new management came up, one of the first things that they started discussing was to look at moving that work back to a nearshore center, so a center closer to home. And the reason provided was that they were not able to understand each other. And I've seen this happen a lot in my career, where you do start setting up these global offices around the world, and then they're not delivering outcomes, and you start thinking that it's poor quality or poor performance. The truth is, next time onwards, I think you should think of the dicky story and ask yourself, have you done a good enough job of communicating your requirements to that team in such a way that they understand and they're able to deliver what they need to back to you? So I'll leave you with that. So coming to the big mistakes, this is what I've commonly found, working on different topics, and of course, learning myself, making the mistakes myself, and realizing what needs to be done. One of the most common mistakes I find that organizations make is you tend to get 2 or 3 of your smartest folks into a room, lock them up for a few days, and ask them to come up with this amazing plan in terms of what needs to be done. Or you hire an external consultant, which is also fine, and they will provide you with perspectives of how this is done in the different industries, and you try and replicate it for your team. But the truth is, what I believe is the SMEs in your organization are the best for people to help you understand the uniqueness of your organization and the best way to deliver on a strategy. And when you're involving them, you're also getting direct buy-in from the team upfront. So I like to think of it as a one-man band. You can only be so good if you're involving a small team. When you start engaging with the SMEs, like Mozart's orchestra, right? You have the violinist, you have different players that are making beautiful music and are experts in those domains. When you start engaging that whole orchestra, that's when you get the best outcome. So the next one I want to talk about is singular focus. Now, this is another, another interesting example is when we were trying, this was unfortunately a WFR exercise. It was a huge workforce reduction exercise at one point in time in my career. And we were so focused on the reduction, the cost reduction in terms of WFR or layoffs, unfortunately, that we forgot about the other aspects. Or I won't say we forgot, we were just so consumed by this that the part around reskilling the workforce that was left behind, the parts around the operating model and looking at the different process changes that were required, looking at the metrics that we would now be measuring these teams by, looking at the technology that we might have to change because of this huge initiative that we were driving forward. All those aspects sort of moved to the wayside, and our only focus was, and we did an excellent job of it, of looking at how we could look at a more cost optimized model in terms of reduction, workforce reduction. Now, in this example, again, you can have the violinist and the violinist can play beautiful music, but what about the rest of the orchestra? and think of orchestrating with all the different players coming together and actually working on it. If we had looked at it a little more holistically, I think, and maybe given ourselves the bandwidth to look at it more holistically, I think we would have had a much more effective outcome. This one in terms of rewarding wrong behavior, and I love the visual there. I think this is a very common one, and I see this in a lot of articles when I look at different topics on this, on strategic initiatives and execution, is metrics, looking at the right metrics. And I want to give you this example. So think of an organization where, let's say you're looking at moving work offshore. So you've given your teams a mandate. I want 50% of your work to move offshore. And historically, you have always measured your teams on utilization, which means you've got to keep the current team busy. Now, how do you expect the managers to drive 50% of that work offshore and resources on site when you continue to measure them on utilization on a regular basis? Or think about this as well. You probably have a T&M model where your resources are driven by utilization, right? The more they get utilized, the more you get billed, and the more billable work you get. You suddenly move from a T&M model to a fixed price model, which is now your resources have to be much more effective in terms of a constrained time period or effort to be able to deliver the same outcome. And obviously, if you haven't changed the metrics, if you haven't changed the behaviors, they're going to continue to operate in that T&M model and make sure that they're utilized at the highest level, which is not at all helping you achieve your goal. So one part is it's extremely important when you're looking at these strategic initiatives and driving towards a change that you're organizing your metrics and the key performance indicators around the workforce that are relevant for that change. And sometimes there's a fine balance. You can't drop one metric completely, but there's a fine balance in terms of how you think of it. The last one I would say is, looking at sponsorship. And I love this visual. I think, I've heard a lot of street bands, and I think they're exemplary. You can make fantastic music as a street band. However, if you give me pennies, this is what you'll get. And if you look at Mozart, on the other hand, and his symphony, and I wish I could have played it for you, a little more effectively. If you look at Mozart's symphony and how it comes together, it's obviously working at a very different level. And when I say sponsorship, I don't just mean monetary and budgetary sponsorship. I think that's critical and it's required especially for large change initiatives. I'm also talking about time and effort from the organization. A lot of times senior management will give you this agenda and they're so busy fighting fires on a day-to-day basis that they're not able to give you their time. And also within the organization and while working with the SMEs, it's extremely important to get the effort and time spent on these initiatives and prioritize the initiative from a sponsorship perspective. So I will end with a nice quote. I'm sure you've seen this before in every change presentation that every presentation you've attended on change. But I really like the saying. It says it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the one that's most responsive to change. And you, as the principal conductor, are the ones that can actually drive the change successfully and can orchestrate the team to be able to be successful. So I will pause here.
Fantastic, Niloofer. Thank you so much for that insight. And I'm as you were speaking, I was monitoring the questions coming in, and I'll relay them to you. We have about 4 minutes here for Q&A, and please provide your questions as they come up. And the first question is about this such important topics that you talked about in terms of alignment, in terms of the governance and the culture and the vision elements, so on and so forth. One of the commentary that we had was that it's often senior leadership is not aligned, right? They do not have an aligned common mental model about the organization's future, the vision, and often, you know, they senior leaders don't do a good job collaborating at the C level and in developing that. So just curious about your practical experience with large organizations at the C level. How do you get senior leaders to collaborate more effectively in creating this vision, and then of course communicating the vision and having the discipline to carry through that vision?
You know, spot on. I cannot agree more. I think it is absolutely a challenge. I mean, I can tell you, especially if you have organizations that are siloed already, and you will see organizational structures depending on the dynamics of the senior leaders. That dynamic actually spills through in terms of culture across the organization. So sometimes it becomes extremely challenging, not just to work with the senior leaders, but also start working within their teams, because the dynamics are very different. It is absolutely important. It is critical that the senior leaders are able to collaborate and engage. And you know, like I said, it is a genuine problem because a lot of senior leaders are so caught up fighting day-to-day fires that they don't have time for this. But it is where I have seen it successful is where we actually have these workshops, these future state vision workshops on a regular basis with the senior leaders coming together, working on what they think needs to be the next big thing or how they want to move forward. And sometimes in a smaller organization, it's that one leader, especially if you think of a startup, right? You know that the founder has a vision and is trying to bring everyone together. In the larger organizations, it's a little more difficult. But you might have one or two strong leaders that have a very clear vision and can help sort of bring the team, rally the team together. But it is extremely important. It's important to get, you know, acknowledgement and, you know, buy-in from the senior leaders, helping with defining that vision statement, coming together to align on what you know, the vision should be and how to break that vision down really helps. And then, of course, continuous sponsorship. And like I said, sponsorship includes time. You need their time. You need to get them to attend, acknowledge, and push for the moving that vision forward.
Very well. We have a time for another 30-second answer here on the governance model. William Fuller asks, how strict a governance model do you recommend? Does it call for standard products and standard work at the execution level? So how strict is the governance model that you recommend?
Like I said, every initiative will have a different governance model. And I was reading an article from McKinsey a few days back as well, where they were talking about the organizational structures are one, you know, you have the typical organizational structures and in an organization, which is who reports to whom. But in the strategic initiatives, you're looking at more of the decision-making process and how you're governing yourself towards that decision-making process. Like I said, there's no one size fits all for the governance model. You'll have to look at the relevance of the work that you're doing, the dynamics that you have within the organization today, and then decide on what's the best governance model for that particular initiative. And it could be loose, it could be loosely structured, it could be a very tight model. It depends on a lot of factors.
Very well. Niloofer Narendran, thank you so much for sharing your expertise, getting comments here. Great presentation. The big view from culture transformation to business transformation and digital transformation, from strategy to execution. So thank you for covering so much with us today and providing your insights. Our global audience appreciates that.
Sure. Thanks so much, Jose. Enjoyed it myself.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Niloofer Narendran to us talking about culture, strategy, and transformation. Niloofer, you can go ahead and toggle your camera off.
Sure.
Thank you very much. So our next session will be at the top of the hour, where we'll be changing gears to technology, and specifically we're going to be talking about artificial intelligence powered digital transformations, and we're going to have a true expert on artificial intelligence and data analytics, the leader of AI and data analytics at Dell is going to be with us. His name is Bill Wong, and Bill is going to drive us through this digital transformation journey powered by artificial intelligence. So we're going to get a little bit deeper on the technologies that are powering digital transformation in financial services organizations. And I see you back at the top of the hour with Bill Wong. Thank you.